welcome to Disrupt. If we could just get the slides up on the screen, that would be great. Thanks so much for coming today. This is the ninth year that we've run Disrupt. We kicked it off here in London back in 2017, and I think we've got a really great agenda lined up for you today. We've got some amazing speakers. Some of our customers have volunteered their time to come and join us here today, and I think you're going to hear some great stories, as well as hearing from some of the experts in Sabio. If I could just get the slides up here as well, please. Thank you very much. So, as I say, this is the ninth year of running Disrupt, and we've actually taken Disrupt across Europe this year. So we kicked off in Madrid last month. We're obviously here in London, where we got started back in 2017. We're off to Paris next month, first time we've taken it to France, and then we're over in Netherlands, in Amsterdam, later this year as well. So this event has grown massive over the years, and it's just great to see so many people here, and looking forward to taking it across Europe as well. So I promise you this is going to be a great use of your time. And as Craig mentioned, when we started out with this concept of Disrupt, the idea was always to try and think about the art of the possible, think about what's possible for customer experience. And to bring together experts from both within Sabio, from across the industry, and from our customers as well, to think about what's possible and look at how emerging technology will impact us and the way that we as consumers interact with organisations. And obviously, as Craig mentioned, there was one theme that really came up, and it's been all over the news really for the last couple of years, and that's this subject of artificial intelligence. So we are going to be delving, a bit deeper into some of that today, and really what it means and how to bring it to life within your organisations. And I'm going to be exploring that a bit to start with as well. AI really is, in the early stages of shaping every part of society at the moment. It's touching pretty much every part of our lives. And the interesting thing about customer service, which is where we all work, is that I think we're at the forefront of this revolution. Customer experience has become the battleground for a lot of these key, big technology vendors, because they know that AI is the place where it can impact customer service the most. So that's really why there's so much interest in this space at the moment. And it really is hard to keep up with what's going on. It's really challenging just to keep a pace of the rapid developments in AI at the moment. So attending events like this are really important, and part of what we aim to do today is to really keep you up to speed with what's going on and think about how you can take that back to your business. So just to kind of illustrate an example of how quickly this is moving at the moment, and part of the reason that people are so excited about it is that we are at the beginning of a once-in-a-generational technology shift. AI has established itself as a general-purpose technology, and general-purpose technologies tend to have a wide range of applications across society. They impact lots of different sectors and lots of different histories. But if we think about, the history of general-purpose technologies, they've typically driven major leaps of innovation and driven major advances in productivity across society. But quite often, these transformations have taken many, many years, sometimes even decades, to take a hold. If we think about, the steam engine and how long it took to build the railroads out to take advantage of that. If we think about electricity and power stations and what was needed to really harness that technology. And then obviously the internet. But the interesting thing about this AI revolution is that it's going to be made available to billions of people throughout the world in near real time. And this is likely to supercharge the pace of innovation across the world and, rapidly transform society, much, much more so than any other general-purpose technology we've seen in the past. And again, just to kind of give you an idea about how quickly this technology is moving at the moment, this is quite a lot going on in this graph here, but what it shows you is the performance measured of the most frontier AI models, measured through something called a GPQA score, which is a Google Proof question and answer score. And this test was created to measure the performance of the latest AI models. And what it does is it poses a load of questions around things like biology, chemistry, physics, these types of things, to test the capability of these new models. Now, if we think about a human, a PhD level human, taking one of these tests, we would typically expect them to score somewhere in the high 70s for one of these tests, okay? Now, if we jump back 6 months ago, the most advanced AI models that we were seeing, I think, from OpenAI were scoring something like about 60% in these tests. But just the recent models that were released a few weeks ago are now scoring above human levels. So they're scoring in the high 80s across these tests. But the most interesting thing is the advancement in such a short space of time. So that's a 50% improvement in the capability of these models in just 6 months. That's how quickly this technology is moving at the moment. And what that's leading a lot of people to speculate on is, are we moving towards this age of artificial superintelligence? And what we mean by that is the combined intellect of many, many humans, perhaps even all of the humans on the planet, this incredible intellect that these models people are speculating about. I think we're certainly not there yet, and maybe we're many years or maybe decades away from that. But this other term you may have heard used quite a lot is artificial general intelligence. And this is the point at which AI demonstrates the same capabilities as a human, the same ability to answer many, many different complex issues at the level of a human. And again, we're not quite there yet. Some people are speculating maybe the end of this decade, 5-6 years' time, we'll get there. Where we are today is something that is referred to as artificial capable intelligence. And this is a level of AI that's able to perform as well as humans in a very specific set of tasks, but not as general as a human across many different tasks. And we're rapidly sort of moving towards this. Another term that you may have heard to describe this is agentic AI. That's been the sort of latest buzzword that we've seen to describe this capability over the last few years. And I look at it as the kind of the third wave of AI, and I'll explain a bit more about what that means. So when we think about the first wave of true AI, really this came about back in 2010 with the advance of machine learning. Now AI as a concept has been around actually since the early 1950s. It was first Alan Turing, amazing, incredible British scientist that first dreamt of this idea of machines that could think for themselves, and very shortly afterwards the term artificial intelligence was coined. But really, the AI that we've had up until the early 2010 really was very basic. It wasn't really intelligent at all. It consisted of humans trying to encode, the real world into an algorithm, and it just proved impossible to do. So it was only really, back in 2010 when, machine learning came about, and we allowed computers to start to interpret the real world and recognize patterns in the real world and turn those into meaning, that when we saw the first wave of true intelligence. And that sort of led to this incredible advance in the machine's ability to recognize images or recognize speech or recognize and understand language. And that's kind of where we've been for the last, 15 years or so. Then, that sort of forms the foundation of AI as we know it today. But then, a couple of years ago, we had this concept of generative AI coming along. And if we think about machine learning as almost like a pattern recognition machine, something that can understand and interpret real-world data, generative AI almost turns that on its head, and it kind of has the ability not just to recognize patterns, but to generate patterns. And therefore, we've seen examples of this generating images, generating text, generating speech. And more recently, applying this ability to reason, which is the ability to break a problem down into smaller steps and then apply intelligence to solve it. And that's kind of where we've been for the last 2.5 years. And that's what's really ignited this excitement about AI over the last few years, and why it's such a hot topic for everyone. We're now moving into this stage of agentic AI, which, as I mentioned, was around, it's been around for a few months now. And this kind of takes those capabilities one step further. So it gives us the ability to start defining goals for AI to go and complete. And the AI can go and complete those on our behalf. So it can execute tasks, it can fulfill tasks on our request. And it can also act autonomously. So instead of having to refer back to us to make a decision, it can actually make those decisions to achieve the outcome on our behalf. And that's really this new wave of AI that we're moving into at the moment. So if we think about that in the context of customer service, the vision for this is that these AI agents become the first point of interaction that we have with a customer. So the customer will be able to engage using natural language. They'll be able to talk to it, or they'll be able to chat with it, for example. It will be able to understand the context behind the request that's coming in. It will be able to answer those questions directly in many cases, and then go and fulfill the task that the customer is asking it to do. And then worst case, if that doesn't work, it can bring the right human into the loop, pass that context over, and make sure that there's a seamless transition to bring the human in when needed. Now, I really do believe that this is the future of customer service. I think we're moving to an era now where every single touch point that we as consumers will have with our brands will start with a conversational AI of some description. That's the future that we're moving towards. And that's supported by a lot of the industry analysts as well. If you think about Gartner as a great example, they're predicting that agentic AI will solve 80% of customer service problems by 2029. Now, that's a pretty bold statement, 80% of customer interactions solved by 2029. But actually, they've used the word problem, so not every reason the customer contacts us is a problem. Okay, often they'll speak to us about other issues. So I think maybe this is achievable, and Gartner are predicting that this could lead to a 30% reduction in operational costs for those organisations that really harness this technology, which I think is realistic, and that's certainly something that us, the team at Sabio, are helping our clients move towards. So I wanted to have a quick look at some of the challenges that we're going to need to overcome in order to fulfil this vision. So the first thing that I talk to a lot of businesses about is, they've used ChatGPT, they've used agentic AI in some description, and they're trying to understand, why can't we just put this into our business and help it, have it answer customer questions? They want this full conversational experience, but it's really important that we get the right balance between providing full agency to these types of, chat or voice bots, or having some level of control. And it's getting the balance between the two. The more agency we give to the technology, the greater the chance it has of making a mistake or providing the wrong information. So for certain tasks, we can provide some level of agency, but for others, we still need to create a more deterministic approach. We need to create a process that the AI follows. And the art of getting this right is about getting the balance between the two. Certainly us, as designers of these systems, the constraints used to be that we would struggle to, figure out how humans will want to interact with these things, and therefore we will constrain with what the technology can do. But now what we're doing is actually having to constrain the technology to respond in a certain way. And it's getting this balance that's really key. So it's all about layering these agentic experiences over the top of a more deterministic approach, which is one that we've been used to for the last few years. And I think, if we look at what Gartner is saying, again, if we look at the hype curve, they're still saying that, the generative AI-infused virtual assistants are still relatively early on in their development. They've got to go through this trough of disillusionment before they come out the other side. If we think about more conventional, voice and chatbots being through that plateau now. And autonomous agents have still got some way to go. So how do we apply that to our businesses? Well, if we look at most businesses today, this is fairly typical. This data is from UK contact centres, and it breaks down the demand types that come in to a typical contact centre in the UK. Now, this might be slightly different to your organisation. Certainly, we speak to some, particularly in retail, that are definitely more sort of chat-based, but voice is still the dominant channel within this. Nearly 70% of interactions are still coming in on voice. So why is that? I've been working in this industry now for over 25 years, and ever since I started, people have been trying to get rid of voice. They've been trying to shift people away from that channel. But I think the problem is, in doing that, they're ignoring a really important aspect of human behaviour, which is how we choose to communicate with each other. And I like to think of this in terms of our bandwidth. So when we think about bandwidth, we tend to think, I often think about my home internet, for example. And we think of bandwidth as the speed at which I can download information or receive information, which is my download speed, and the speed at which I can transmit information, or my upload speed. And we as humans have a certain set of bandwidth constraints that we work with as well. So if we think about transmitting information, I can transmit information at about 150 words per minute. That's the typical speed that a human speaks at. If I'm using a keyboard, the average person types at about 40 words per minute. So that's immediately, reducing the speed at which I can transmit information. If we think about it on a smartphone, that speed's reduced further still. So actually, when we think about people using these smartphone devices, it's normally 7 or 8 times slower to use these to transmit information than it is for me to use my voice. And if I'm using gestures, maybe I can accelerate that even further. When we think about receiving information, though, it's slightly different. I can listen to words. I can hear somebody talking about the same speed that I can talk, 150-ish words per minute. But when I read, I can actually read, most people can read at about 300 words per minute. So that's double the speed that I can listen at, that I can listen at. And when we start introducing other forms of communication, like images or icons, that speed increases further still. So this is one of the fundamental reasons why we will never get rid of people wanting to communicate with our brands via voice. People will always want to speak to us, and that's a good thing. I'm just going to illustrate this as well with a quick example. Some of you may have seen me use this before, but I think it highlights quite nicely, the different speeds of communication that we have. So I'm going to ask Alexa here, so what's the weather like in London today?
In London, it's 19 degrees Celsius with mostly cloudy skies. Today, you can expect intermittent clouds, with a high of 20 degrees and a low of 10 degrees.
So you can hear there that it took Alexa about 20 seconds or so to tell me what the weather was like. It was really efficient for me to issue that command, but it took a long time for me to receive the information. If I do the same, in this case it's Siri, but it's a device with a screen. So what's the weather like in London today? You'll see that
okay, here's the weather for today.
Within a split second, I've been able to download, consume huge amounts of information with a breakdown of the weather, what the temperature's like, using icons to help me explain what's going on. So my ability to receive information there was so much faster with a screen and icons involved. So I think it's important to think about these design constraints, not just for the way that we build AI systems, but also the way that our people in our contact centres communicate with our customers. So sort of back to this, when we think about demand today, a lot of what we see are people applying AI projects to messaging channels, to asynchronous messaging or to web chat. And part of the reason they do that is because frankly, it's easier. It's very, very hard to get it right on voice. It's difficult. It requires a lot of expertise. There's a lot of understanding that you need to have about human language. So voice is much harder, but it's where the value is. So this is what we spend a lot of time focusing on at Sabio, is how we can help organizations exploit what's happening on voice, and more recently with email as well, with long-form text and applying automation to these channels. But as we take this forward to the future, I think we're moving to an era now where this idea of channels, communicating via different channels, will start to disappear completely. So I think what Gartner are forecasting is that within the next few years, 30% of the Fortune 500 companies will communicate with their customers through a single AI-enabled channel. So the idea about picking up the telephone, going to a website, using a chatbot will start to disappear, and there'll be a single user interface. And I actually think what this will do is actually increase the amount of voice traffic that people use to communicate with their customers. If it becomes easy just to have a chat with a website, based on what we just talked about, it will become easier to use your voice, and that will become an even more important channel than it is today. And I think that's a great thing, because it will offer better service, but it also allows us to capture more data and understand more about our customers and their requirements. So I've talked about agentic AI in the workplace. So this is us building our AI agents to talk to our customers. But there's another really important point to consider here, which is agentic AI that's going to be built within the devices that we all carry with us. We saw the example earlier on of Siri and Alexa, and we've got OpenAI with their version, we've got Perplexity. There are lots of these different agentic AI platforms out there at the moment. But what we're starting to see now is that these are being increasingly positioned as our personal assistants, and they will help us out with the tasks that we have in life. And increasingly, more and more of our customer journeys will be starting on these channels. So I'm going to give you a quick example here. So this is OpenAI's version. They call it Operator. Some of you may have seen this before. And if you go to their website, you can create a quick demo here. There's lots of different demos. I picked this one out. But it says, you're going to see here, somebody asking a question, find me a family-friendly campsite in Joshua Tree this weekend. So someone types it into their browser, and then what happens is Operator goes off in the background. It inputs data into websites. It does a few searches. It pulls information together. It finds, it puts the date in, selects a few bits of information on the website, and eventually comes back with a recommendation. And then at the end of it, the person says, great, book it, brilliant. Now, on the face of it, that looks wonderful. It looks amazing if that would happen. But what this skirts over a little bit, and the vision that's being sold to us by the tech companies, is it glosses over the complexities of real life. If you think about what's actually needed to bring that to life, how many people am I going camping with? Do I have a tent or a camper van? Do I need electricity? Am I happy with the spot? How do I want to pay for it? Do I need electricity? There are so many things that are glossed over within this nice, shiny demo that I think these are the types of questions we need to be asking of the big technology companies at the moment when they start showing us stuff like this. Never mind the fact that, if I went and did this and booked a weekend away from AI with my wife, she would go spare because I wouldn't have done my research properly. So that's an important point to think about as well. But there are so many examples of this. Think about, I'm going to London next week. Can you sort my hotel and travel? Again, quite a simple task that if I had an assistant to help me out with that, they would be able to go off and do it. But to bring this task to life, it would need access to my diary. It would need my preference of travel, train times, where do I want my hotel to be, my room preference, how many nights, where in this. So many questions that need to be asked, for it to fulfill this task. Can you book my car for a service? Again, another really simple task on the face of it, but it needs to know information about my car. How many miles has it done? What type of service do I need? What's the service history? Maybe another one here, I need to renew my car insurance. But again, loads of information. Where's it parked overnight? What's the registration number? Have I got any issues with my license? So what we start to see is that, on the face of it, this technology looks incredible, but there's a huge amount of information that's needed in order to fulfill these tasks. Okay, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a second. So the other challenge that we need to consider is what impact will this have on our brands? As more and more customer journeys start on these third-party agentic AI platforms, what does it mean? What if they have a particular preference for an insurer or an airline or a bank or something like that? What happens when we start to lose control of that customer experience? And as I mentioned, by 2028, Gartner are stating that 70% of customer journeys will both start and end with these on-device agentic AI experiences. So that means we will start to lose a bit of control over the experience we deliver to customers and potentially lose access to some of that data that we need in order to continue to improve our experiences. So that's one really important thing we need to think about. The other thing we need to think about is trust. Now, I talked about trust a bit earlier on, but when we think about trust, we tend to think about data security. When most people talk about trust in the context of AI, we think about, where's our data stored? Is it safe? Will it be used by somebody to steal my money or something like that? But as we start to hand more and more agency over to these generative AI platforms, we need to start thinking about, firstly, do we trust it with the data that we're sharing? In the examples I gave earlier on, we're sharing things like driver's license details, medical history, all of our relationships with our friends, our family, maybe our bank details, so much information needed to hand over to these agentic AI platforms to fulfill the task for us. Now, it could be, the big challenge then is, will it be used to manipulate us in some way? We're already used to kind of very targeted Instagram ads, and that's probably the less concerning. But, will it be used to influence our political leanings? Will it impact the outcome of elections? We've already seen in various parts of the world where AI algorithms have been given the goal of maximizing engagement and have ended up stoking hatred and prioritizing, inflammatory content. And that's had a devastating impact for certain communities throughout the world. So are we prepared to share our lives with this platform in order to get the benefits that we talked about earlier on? So another component of trust is, do we trust that as we give AI more agency, it will do a good job on our behalf? Humans aren't perfect, and we all make mistakes all of the time, but our tolerance for mistakes by other humans is actually quite high. Our tolerance for mistakes or failure by machines is actually very low. So the question is, how much better does a machine have to be to fulfill a task for us to completely trust it? Would we trust it to recruit somebody new to our business? Would we trust it to manage a complaint, for example? What about launching a new product? It will depend on the task, but as we just really need to think about how much agency we're prepared to give and how much better it would need to perform in order for us to really trust it to do a better job than a human would. And perhaps the ultimate manifestation of this is a self-driving car. You know, if we think about self-driving cars, we really are trusting them with our lives when we step in them. And you know, we've been promised this by Elon for a number of years now, and he's not delivered yet. You know, first back in 2016 was when he first promised, yeah, it's definitely coming this year. And then it's 2017 and 2018. I'm told it's coming this year. It's going to be launched in June next month in Austin, apparently. So we'll see what happens there. But you know, this dream and the fact that people have bought into this and trusted it is actually quite concerning, because you know what's actually happened is that Tesla, despite being some of the safest cars in the world, actually have the highest fatality rate in the world. Now, I'm not suggesting this is all down to AI, but certainly there is a significant component of this where people have placed their trust in an agentic AI platform, the ultimate agentic AI platform, a self-driving car, and it hasn't worked out particularly well for them. So this is a genuine concern. Other things we need to think about are this growing gap between society's willingness to adopt technology and the capability of the technology itself. So we think about this what we call a technological threshold, which is what can a machine do? But we also have the societal threshold, which is what do we actually want these machines to do? And what we're seeing is this gap potentially starting to grow more and more. So, you know, this isn't just AI, by the way. This happens to lots and lots of different technologies. But, you know, what if, you know, society takes longer than we anticipate to adopt these AI platforms? Or what if they reject them completely in some cases, you know, self-driving cars being a case in point. So that's another thing that we need to think about. All these challenges mean that we really just need to think carefully about the human experience of AI. Just because something's technically possible, it doesn't necessarily mean that we should do it. And we also need to recognize that as humans, the more we have, the more we want. So human needs are infinite, and that's just human nature. So thinking about how we can use technology to improve service and improve the experience that we deliver to meet these kind of ever-growing needs of humans, I think is how we need to frame this technology, making sure we design it around the humans and therefore increasingly meeting their needs. I do believe, though, that if used well, this technology has the ability to really amplify the way that we service each other, the way that we deliver customer service in particular. You know, the more we innovate with this technology, the more possibilities that we create. So we shouldn't just see AI as an opportunity to cut cost. We should see it as unlocking new ways in which we can deliver service to people and thinking creatively about, you know, different ways that we can improve the level of service. All we can do, though, really, to get ready for this rapid era of change that's coming ahead to us is prepare for it. We need to think about how we can increasingly experiment. We need to think about ways in which we can use data more effectively. We need to think about how we can make sure that our people and our processes are as flexible as possible to adapt as these changes rapidly progress. And I think that it's the companies and the countries and the individuals that are best able to do that are the ones that are going to really thrive as we move into this age of AI.